Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, I kind of alluded to maybe doing it yesterday. Didn't end up getting to it, but it's probably better this way because now we can do both. I want to look at the two newest additions to the Green Bay Packers, and I want to look at the contracts that they got and see if we can break it down a little bit. You never really know the details until you see the details, if that makes sense. And then after that, one of the things I'd like to touch on is a question that's come up. What are the Packers going to do at wide receiver? I had mentioned kind of yesterday on Packernet After Dark that I don't know that it's the biggest need, but that's not really the question. The question is, what is the plan? So we'll get to that. But let's start with the contracts. So why don't we start off with Nate Hobbs? I think this is probably going to be the less controversial of the two. I think Nate Hobbs is probably liked a little more. I think his contract is always a little bit more reasonable, and I also think once the full details came out, it maybe pushed it even more so in that direction of which one is more liked and accepted compared to the other. But let's start with Nate Hobbs here. So it was, first of all, 26 years old, 4-year deal, $48 million, which is $12 per year. The guarantees for Hobbs are $16 million. Now, this is pretty standard. This is very similar to the Josh Jacobs contract, where it's about a year and a half fully guaranteed. It's a little bit less than that in this case. Now, for those that don't know, when you get that signing bonus, the $16 million, what happens is you get that in a check up front, but as far as the salary cap, that gets split up evenly across the entirety of the contract. So $16 million over 4 years is $4 million per year. Again, he gets all the money up front, but the salary cap takes a $4 million hit every single year over 4 years. That assumes he doesn't leave. So if he were to leave after 1 year, $12 million would accelerate next year. You're not going to pay out multiple years. Okay, so there's that. So in 2025, he's got as far as the salary cap is concerned, this year the $4 million from the signing bonus, because we're only counting 4 of the 16 because it gets spread out. His base salary is just $1.2 million. This is obviously going to count against the guarantees, so this will be subtracted off of that. He's got workout bonuses that equal $400,000 over the course of the year, and he's got a per-game roster bonus that it will be $600,000 over the course of the year. So I think I said that wrong. The workout bonuses is for the off-season workout. The per game is over the course of the year, so it's about $35,000 a game. The total cap hit is just under $6 million to have him as a corner this year. Total cash paid to him is $18.2 million. Next year, 2026, he'll be 27 years old. The signing bonus, again, is $4 million for what was paid the previous year. His base salary is just 1.8, if I didn't just say that. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. There is a roster bonus due on the third league day, typically in March, where they must decide if they're going to pay or release him on this date. That roster bonus is $6.25 million. That's a lot of money. So in a sense, it's kind of a one-year deal because they're going to decide after 1 year if they're going to pay him that roster bonus. So if they decide that this isn't working out, they're going to move on. They're not going to pay him that roster bonus, and the Packers' dead cap hit is going to be $12 million. If they decide to keep him, the $6.25 million gets paid out, and it's a $13 million cap hit for the season, and obviously he's staying at that point. In 2027, he'll be just 28 years old. Again, there's a $4 million signing bonus. His base salary goes up to $9 million. Workout bonus of $400,000 per game, $600,000, so another $1 million. The total cap hit is up to $14 million. Cash pay to be about $10 million. And then if they decide to cut him, because there is no roster bonus thing on this particular year, it would be $8 million in dead cap if they decided to move on and not pay him in 2027. Compared to what the cap hit would be, it would be a $6 million savings. And then finally, 2028 at 29 years old. Again, you got the $4 million workout bonus. It's $9.7 million as a base salary, another $1 million between the roster bonus and workout bonus. The total cap hit would be $14.7 million. The cash paid out would be $10.7. And the dead cap, if he was cut, would be $4 million. And so the savings would be $10.7 million. So in real guarantees, he's got about $17.6 million when you factor in he's going to get his $1.2 million salary, which is part of the reason I think the Packers do this, where they have at a rock bottom first year. Because they want to make sure that the total guarantees are as low as possible. So here's your signing bonus and basically nothing else. And then after this year, we make a decision whether we want to keep you. It's going to be a little bit of a hit, but we're willing to make that determination at that time. If it works out, then we'll continue pumping money your way. But as of right now, $17.6 million is all that's guaranteed. It's a 1-year, $17.6 million deal, which actually is not even entirely true, because if they cut him, you got to count that dead cap hit next year. So it would be pretty painful if they did end up cutting him. It would be a big mistake to have signed him, et cetera, et cetera. But at least it gives them flexibility. Maybe he gets injured or some kind of thing happens, whatever. It gives them a potential out if in case of emergency. But I also don't want to pretend that this is just a 1-year deal, because in reality, that would be stupid. It's way too expensive if it's just 1 year. So they're hoping that this guy does end up playing for the duration of the contract. They do want that to be a thing, but they've just given themselves a decent amount of flexibility, and obviously the flexibility grows every year that he's here. So it gets easier and easier to move on. And then final thing I'd look at is the actual cap hit. And again, it's more important to look at this in terms of percentage of the league cap, and understand that the league cap is going to go up. Now, we don't know to what, but Spotrac does try to estimate that. So as of right now, this year, he's a 2% cap hit, 2.14%. It's a pretty sizable jump. It goes up to $13 million. It feels like a big number. In the grand scheme of things for cornerbacks, it's not that big of a number, especially in 2026. It's estimated to be about 4.25%, and that's the maximum, even though it goes up. So it goes up to $14 million. They have it going down to 4.16%. And then it goes up to $14.7 million, but the cap hit goes down to 3.96%. So 2%, 4.25, 4.16, and 3.96. It never really hits a very big number. To give you some context for Jair, his first year was at 3.4%. That jumped to 4.6, then 9.4. This year in 2025, it's at about 9%, 8.95. Next year would be 8.91. So he's at about 50% of like a big boy contract, which I think kind of makes sense for what we're expecting him to be. He's a mid-tier starter. So 50% of, instead of an 8% or 9% deal, you're looking at, 4 to 4.5%, maybe a little bit below that. I think that's reasonable. By the way, it's crazy to think how much cap space we have. We already have too much money, and I have no idea what in the world we could possibly spend it on. We got to start handing out contracts to people and see if we can start, front-loading those contracts to help us in the future. I don't know if that's a thing, but it should be a thing in my opinion. But if we end up moving on from Jair, we're going to get more money. It's not a ton, but it's like $7 million additional. Just crazy. But before we move off of Mr. Hobbs here, obviously we've had a little time to find a couple little tidbits here and there, some good, some bad. We're Packer fans. We'll stick with some of the positive. Probably hammered enough of the negative anyways. A couple little things. First of all, we'll go with this. This is pointing to Nate Hobbs' connection. This is via Big B, went back and found this. But after Rich Bisaccia left, here is what Nate Hobbs put on social media. It's kind of small. See if I can zoom in here. Dear Coach, honestly, I don't know where to begin. So I'll just start by saying I love you. Since I was 12, I didn't really have a father figure in my life till later. After a while, he passed away too. In 2021, I think, Coach Gruden stepped down and you became head coach. That year, I met another man in my life that believed in me and loved me like a brother, a feeling I hadn't felt in so long. You were the only person I would allow to curse me out severely, then tell me that you love me 2 hours later. One thing admired about you so much is that when things got hectic, the more you appeared to remain even more poised. 2 things you taught me in this lifetime I'll carry for the rest of my life. Nobody gives an F, and put a little love in your heart and a smile on your face. Coach, you had my back and believed in me when thousands didn't, and for that, I love you. So, 2 things. One of them, Nate Hobbs really likes Rich Bisaccia. Number 2, probably more importantly, For everybody that can't stand Rich Bisaccia, this is why he's a Green Bay Packer. This has got to be one of the most loved coaches in the NFL. His ability to connect with players, his ability to recruit players. I don't know if Keyshawn Nixon or Nate Hobbs or Josh Jacobs are here right now if it wasn't for Rich Bisaccia. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know that that's true. I understand special teams isn't where we want it to be. I don't know that Rich Bisaccia is really here even 50% at this point because of his special teams prowess. Here he is talking about Rich Bisaccia.
Rich Bisaccia. I can't speak enough about Rich, bro. Like, that man right there, like, I'm not a super emotional dude or none of that, bro. I shed a tear when I found out he was leaving because that was the first man other than my uncle that, like, I felt like I had that, like, it was like a father-son bond in some way. I'm not gonna say, like, clean cut, like, but like, it was like somewhere like a father-son. I felt like he was like a male role model in my life I didn't have for a long time.
Yeah.
He was like the only coach I ever let cuss me out.
Let.
Come on, bro. Come on now.
You don't ever let.
He the only coach I ever let cuss me out and hug me 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
But you knew it was genuine. It was from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And,
he wants the best for you.
Wants the best for me.
This was on Max Crosby's podcast last year. He was talking about Rich Bisaccia. So look, I don't know how good of a head coach Bisaccia would be. I don't know how good of a special teams coordinator Rich Bisaccia is. But the key component of being a coach, one of the key components of being a coach, the ability to connect and get guys to follow your lead, there can't be that many more guys that are better than Rich Bisaccia at that. It doesn't mean anything if you can't actually coach beyond that. But he seems to have a pretty special ability to be able to connect with football players. All right, let's take our first break. We'll come back and take a look at Banks' new contract. So this time around, I actually want to start with what Ken Ingalls posted, because the debate is this just a big fake contract with a bunch of fake numbers, et cetera, et cetera? Here is what he had to say. Aaron Banks' Packers deal, a true $77 million, $19.25 million, I'm guessing per year deal. Another $2 million available in incentives. A bit unusual for the Packers since the cash paid goes down each year. Typically, they go big year 1, small year 2, then jump up year 3 and 4. 2025 cap hit will be $9 million, with likely to be earned per game. Aaron Wilson's got the details written out as such. Aaron Banks deal 4 years, $77 million base value, $81.5 million max value, $27 million in signing bonus, salaries 1.5, 7.7, 5.1, 13.1, $9.5 million roster bonus. 2026 third day of the league year, $9.5 million roster bonus. 2027 third day league year, $500K NFL honors incentive. 2028, $29,412 per game active roster bonus. Annual $1.5 million NFL honors base escalator. 2026 through 2028. All right, so as it stands right now, it was a $27 million signing bonus, so it's going to be $6.75 million per year over the 4 years. $1.5 million base salary, and then $500,000 in per game roster bonus and $400,000 in workout bonus. So the grand total cap number this year is $9 million. That is 3% of the salary cap. 2026, the base salary jumps up to $7.7 million. You still have the signing bonus. There is also that third league year roster bonus. March 15th roster bonus is $9.5 million in additional. That's big. Now again, if you decide not to go that route and want to move on before the roster bonus, you can do that, but you're going to take a $20 million dead cap hit. So as far as, sort of likely to be earned or whatever, unless there's some serious injury issues or whatever, he's going to be here for 2 years. and we're going to take on a $25 million cap hit pending some kind of a restructure or whatever. It's a lot of money for a guard. That's 8.4% of the cap. Remember, talking like Jair Alexander, his highest was at like 9 something. Then in 2027, it's $5.1 million. Still have the prorated signing bonus. You've got again, a $9.5 million roster bonus, plus the per game and workout bonuses for a grand total cap hit of $22.25 million. The cap as a percentage goes down to 7.2, which is still fairly high. There is a little bit of breathing room in terms of getting out. Again, they can get out in 2026 for the cost of $20.2 million, which is still a savings of $4.6. In 2027, it's $13.5 million in dead cap money, which would actually be a savings of $8.75. 2028 is $13 million in base salary, which is obviously extremely high. So this is basically the point where there's really not much left as far. In fact, there are no more guarantees. There's only the prorated signing bonus. So they could walk away from this with a $6.75 million dead cap hit and $14 million in savings. But they throw the rest of the money down as a base salary, $13.1 million. You've got the prorated signing bonus. You've got the per game and the workout bonus for a grand total of $20.75 million as a cap number. So, there's not a lot of ways to look at this as being a small contract. We could actually do it this way just to kind of visualize it. So the full contract value is $77 million, but obviously he doesn't have to earn all $77 million, right? That's kind of the argument. However, here's essentially how it would break down. So if he only plays for 1 year, it's a 1 year, $29 million contract is what it comes out to. When you look at 2025 plus the dead money in 2026, it would be $29.28 million. It's a very high contract. If he plays 2 years, it's 2 years, $47 million, which is $23 million per year. It's a little bit more reasonable. It's a little bit crazy, but it's a little bit more reasonable. If he plays 3 years, it's 3 years, $62.88 million, which is $21 million per year, or he can play 4 years for 77, which is $19.25 million. So there's no real scenario where, he didn't actually get that much money. The lowest APY, obviously, is if he goes all 4 years and it's $19.25 million. The lowest amount that could be paid out is $29.28 million, and that's if he only plays for 1 year. So obviously 2 years makes the most sense. That's when the average per 20, the difference between 23 and 19 is not massive, as opposed to the 1 year $29 million. So you would expect at least 2 years playing here before it starts to make a little bit more sense. But again, it's still going to be a big contract. It's going to be 2 years, $47 million, $23.7 million per year. And obviously, if he only plays 2 years, it means it wasn't a good decision, which just makes the whole thing terrible. I mean, ideally, he plays for 4 years because he's worth the money, and, there you go. So, it's a big contract. I mean, they're not paying him to be what I'm describing him as, which is a guy that kind of just raises the floor a little bit above what Josh Myers is. Because he does do that, and that's great, and the floor of our offensive line goes up. But they are obviously paying him because they believe he's a very good football player. We'll see, and I hope that happens, and that would be fantastic. All right, let's grab this here. This is Christian McCaffrey talking about Mr. Banks. Now, this is a little bit of an older clip, but I don't care. Here we go.
Unbelievable. I think, and he's only getting better too, which is exciting. I think having a guy like Trent Williams in that room, he's able to, give them so much wisdom and allow them to play fast. But, man, Banks is a special football player. All those guys are.
One last thing I want to bring up about Aaron Banks, because I do think it's important, even though PFF does kind of account for these things, but it's worth noting, and Boss brought this up on social media. PFSN, whatever that is, said, among players with over 100 snaps at guard, Joe Thuney and Quinn Miners were best at 1.92 pressure rate allowed. New Packers offensive lineman Aaron Banks ranked 53rd at 5.6%. This is one of those thought exercise things where you have to stop and think to yourself, okay, can we think about some context here? Here's what Boss said. Purdy was also 6th in longest time to throw at 2.93 seconds per pass. Context. It is important. Offensive linemen who have to block longer are more likely to give up pressures. Now, again, I think PFF does account for this at a certain point. There is sort of a cutoff or whatever. But there's also a point under which there's also a secondary question of how many times do they throw at 1.8 seconds or 2.2 seconds. It's one of those things, and I've said this about PFF and pretty much every other stat. Every stat or grade or whatever is somewhat polluted by the people around you. If you have drop issues, there's a good chance your quarterback is part of that. When you're looking at running back yards per attempt, obviously offensive line is a big part of that. So we got to see Aaron Banks in Green Bay with Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love and having Elton Jenkins and Rasheed Walker next to him and not these absolutely horrific football players that he had next to him last year. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Do I have massively high hopes? No. But I am excited about the fact that our offensive line did improve. I mean, he's a big boy, man, and he can move, and I think that's what the Packers like about him. You got a 330-pound guy that can freaking get on his horse and get out in space. He may have his struggles, but it's an appealing thing. So we'll just wait and see. Again, they obviously believe they got themselves a really good player. There have been many times the Packers have brought in people that I didn't necessarily understand that went on to be very good players. There was one time where they paid a good amount of money for a guy that I didn't think was very good and didn't turn out to be very good, and that was Billy Turner. It was another offensive lineman. So we'll see if this is a Billy Turner or if this is closer to one of the other many players they've brought in that everybody said was an overpay, including Xavier McKinney last year, by the way. You may not remember that. It seems stupid now, like, oh, everybody knew he was a top. No, they didn't. Everybody said he was, and they were talking about all these other guys that were better. It's like, what are you guys talking about? But we'll see. All right, why don't we actually take our final break here, and I want to do a speed run through a couple other bits of news. There's 2 new names that popped up that are on the Packers watch list. I don't know if I believe any of it, but we got to talk about it because it came up. And then, again, kind of a question of what are the Packers going to do at wide receiver, which will flow a little bit into this conversation. So we'll take a break. We'll be right back. So when I say I don't necessarily believe it, this has already been widely reported. Brian Gutekunst talks about this all the time. Agents love to use their name to say, oh, the Packers are interested. Why? Because it gins up more interest for their client to make him seem more desirable. Now, as far as why the Packers wouldn't call him on that, I really think it has to do with, I decided not to play it because it doesn't really count in this context. I probably should have just kept it up, but, what the heck is the guy's name now? Anyways, Packers, old school Packers front office guy that used to do a lot of negotiations and whatnot would talk about how agents would oftentimes just lie about contracts and say that it was worth this much money. And, you might say, well, why would they let somebody do that? Because it makes the team look like they gave up more than they did. Because the team doesn't give a crap. They give a crap about getting the deal done, and that's it. If it's going to make you sign on the dotted line to tell the news media outlets that you got this guy more money than is actually real with all your fake numbers and all that BS, go ahead and do it. And so, why would the Packers allow this? Well, there's a couple thoughts that come to mind. Number one is they don't know who's necessarily saying it, right? It's all kind of cloak and dagger. I mean, you assume it's probably the agent, but, plausible deniability. Number two is just maintaining relationships. Again, in the video, he would have agents reach out and say, hey, would you mind if we do X, Y, and Z? It'd be interesting to look at the guys we signed and check the agents and see if they're connected to these people in any way, if it's the same agency. Because it wouldn't be that shocking if there was some kind of a deal behind closed doors where you say, look, we're kind of torn between these two teams. Could you do me a favor if we get this deal done? Could I use your name as being involved in X, Y, Z, whatever? Little things. The bottom line is the Packers don't care. Brian Gutekunst has flat out said that agents like to use their team as leverage. They lie all the time about the Packers being interested, and the Packers have never once busted them out on that. I mean, in terms of directly, they might come out and you find out later that they didn't pursue them or whatever it is that the Packers might say. but I've never had the Packers or anybody come out and immediately refute it. Go on social media, Brian Gutekunst's account, which I don't even think he has, and say, this is not a true report. Please take this down immediately. It doesn't. They don't care. They're going to allow the deal to get done, and then later on they'll come out and be like, yeah, it wasn't true. And it seems like the Packers are strangely always the team that are being used. And my previous thought, which may be essentially true, is we know that Brian Gutekunst's philosophy is to be in on everybody, to at least pick up the phone on everybody. Now, Packer fans are upset because there's a couple people that apparently they didn't pick up the phone for. I still don't know what the source of that is, so I can't explicitly say whether that's true or not, but it's very possible that it was a simple matter of, well, the Packers called, and so we're going to pretend that that's interest and then throw their name in there, when really it was just a matter of calling for the sake of calling. It's just basic due diligence. You're trying to gauge the market. You're calling about everybody. So in some sense, yeah, I'm interested in everybody. And in some sense, we're not really interested in anybody. We're just finding out what's out there. And we're going to, once we get all the numbers together, find out what the market is, find out what everybody's asking for. We're going to put all the pieces together and find out what makes sense. But we're not calling because we're targeting really anybody. But via Slick Rick Scoops, which I think is kind of a nonsense account, but we're going to do it anyways, the Packers are very interested in bringing in Dante Fowler, and there is mutual interest between the two sides to get a deal done. Now, honestly, this one makes a little bit more sense to me than the other one that we will talk about in a minute. We've talked about Dante Fowler very recently, as in yesterday, but let me just get to this one again. Now, it doesn't make sense, just to be very clear about that, but at least it makes a little bit more sense than the alternative. Dante Fowler is 30 going on 31, which is not great. He has been in the league a long time and can't really seem to stay on a team. He was with Jacksonville for 3.5 years, LA for 1.5 years, Atlanta for 2, Dallas for 2, Washington for 1. So none of that is good. With that said, some positives. He was a number 3 overall selection. So it's one of those lightning in a bottle, trying to see if you can do. Now, everybody else has tried the whole lightning in a bottle thing, and they don't like him. They let him go. With that said, though, the statistics are really not the worst in the world as a pure pass rusher. In fact, if you look at his pressure statistics, almost every year has been good to very good, with a couple, not the greatest. But especially recently, this past year was 50 pressures and 11 sacks on 387 attempts. That was one of his best years ever. So that's, I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and do the math, but that's very good. The year before that, 206 attempts. He had 36 pressures and 5 sacks. That's great. 40 pressures and 6 sacks on 259 attempts is very good. So those are the last 3 years. One thing that you will notice that, again, we talked about yesterday, those numbers are very low. And it's not because of injury, which is a good thing. He's 261 pounds. He's a big dude. He doesn't seem to have an injury history. He just isn't a starter. In 2022, so 3 years ago, when he had 40 pressures on 259 attempts, which is great, 73 pass rush grade, 61 overall, 6 sacks isn't the greatest, but, whatever. He didn't start a single game that year for Dallas. In 2023, his second year with Dallas, he didn't start a single year. He had 36 pressures on 206 attempts, which is fantastic. He didn't start a single game. And then in 2024, he went to Washington, and he did start several games, which is great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He started 7 games, including their 2 playoff games. So some positive momentum. And again, 50 pressures on 387 attempts is great, and 11 sacks. So even the sack numbers aren't really low when you factor in how little he plays. So I don't know the answer as to why he doesn't really play more. But I think the most obvious answer is that he is a pure pass rush specialist. So he is a third down, get after it guy. I don't mind that. For a team that just can't get home with 4, if you're telling me that this guy's only utility is the ability to, win, to get after. You get Rashawn on one side and Fowler on the other, even if you're rotating where you don't really want him out there. And, he's going to get stuck out there. It happens. You get some run defense guys out there in pass rush situations. That's why you want more versatile guys that can do both so you don't get stuck with guys like Fowler in run situations. But, as far as things that I would hate, this is not one of them. Now, I don't believe the report. I don't think it's true. This is one guy with a pretty sketchy background in terms of his, there have been several of these guys who have, they swear up and down that they've got real sources and all that stuff. And sometimes they hit, and that's why they have a very loyal following. But I think it just becomes a matter of, everybody misses too, but also everybody with enough swings is going to hit. I'm not going to go dig in to find out his hit rate or whatever, but look, at this point, with the level of sort of desperation, and when you look at it and say, this is a guy at 261 pounds that fits as a defensive end, he has very little tread on his tires as a number 3 overall prospect because he hasn't really been a starter. He's been in the league for 10 years, and he has 5,100 snaps. So you're talking on average like 500 snaps. He had a couple of years where he was treated as a starter, and he did quite well. In L.A. was when he actually started 880 snaps, and he had 67 pressures and 15 sacks that year. Now, he also had a really good run defense grade, which is weird, so maybe they allowed him to stay out there because he was thriving in it, or their scheme allowed for that or something. I don't really know. But I don't see how there isn't going to be a payoff as far as pass rush. I said that weird, but you get what I'm saying, right? It's not a super ideal situation, but you're a team that just needs to be able to win with 4. You're a team that, scenario time, playoffs are on the line, you're down by 4. There's 2 minutes and 28 seconds, or there's a minute and 28 seconds left. The other team, the Lions, have the ball on their own 34. It's 3rd down and 7. We have to get to the quarterback. We have to get him off the field and put the ball back in Jordan Love's hands, or our playoff hopes are dashed. Do you have a guy? The Commanders last year did have him for the postseason. In the divisional round against Detroit, they put him out there for 40 snaps. He had 3 pressures on 25 attempts. It's not the most impressive thing in the world, but it's well above 10%. He was useful in that situation. In the championship game against Philadelphia, they decided to go a different route. Probably because Philly's more of a run defense team, but they said, you know what, we're not going to put him on the field. He had 16 total snaps, only 8 attempts in pass rush, 0 pressures. He didn't have any utility in the game because they didn't play him. It seems to be the story of Dante Fowler's life. If you put him on the field, he'll help you as a pass rusher. But you have to commit to putting him on the field. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. And maybe with the Packers' improvements in run defense and with the guys like Edgerrin Cooper and the linebackers improving and things of that nature, maybe you can mitigate that with bringing in more physicality at the safety and linebacker or and corner positions. Maybe you feel comfortable enough to do that. Again, this is not a slam dunk kind of a thing, but as you look at it, would you be okay with a 31-year-old pass rush specialist? I understand the negatives, but at this point, for a relatively cheap price, I wouldn't hate it. Only because there are no other better options outside of just wait for the draft and hope you hit a home run with somebody in the draft. But even then, wait to the draft, hit a home run in the draft, and have Dante Fowler. Oh no, my life is ruined. Bring him in on some fake 2-year deal that's a 1-year rental. Or just pay him for 1 year. Bosa got a 1-year deal. A bunch of guys are getting 1-year deals. Give him a 1-year contract with a bunch of... I would incentivize the living crap out of that contract. I love bonus incentivized contracts. I really do. I think all contracts should be like salesman contracts where it's all commission based. If you come in here and you suck, you're going to get veteran minimum. If you come in here and you get like 15 sacks and all this crazy stuff, you're going to be the highest paid pass rusher in football. Sound good? Because I'm fine with both ends of that spectrum. I'm guessing it's usually players that don't want to do that. They want a little bit more security, but Man, I love me some heavily incentivized contracts. One kind of interesting thing, I went ahead and used the robot to do a little sleuthing for me. There really is not anything outside of that one report. However, there are some historical points to point out here. Back in 2018, reports from 24/7 Sports and Packers Wire indicated the Packers were among teams eyeing Fowler before he was traded from Jacksonville to LA. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network mentioned Green Bay's interest, though off-the-field concerns reportedly cooled their pursuit at the time. Now, if you're wondering about the off-the-field concerns, we have a 2016 arrest in St. Petersburg, Florida. Fowler was arrested for misdemeanor charges of battery and criminal mischief after an altercation outside an apartment complex, according to police reports cited by ESPN and the Florida Times-Union. Fowler confronted a man who criticized his driving, leading to Fowler allegedly slapping off the man's glasses. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Stepping on them and striking him in the face. The victim sustained minor injuries, a bloody nose and scratches, and property damage was estimated at $50. He was released on $650 bond, blah, blah, blah. 2017 Lakewood Ranch parking lot fight. Video evidence obtained from TMZ Sports and reports by ESPN showed Fowler watching and encouraging a physical altercation between two men in a parking lot near his home. One man was knocked unconscious, suffering a broken nose and cuts. Fowler appeared to intervene only after the fight escalated, but not directly participate in the violence. His then girlfriend and mother of the child were also reportedly involved in a separate verbal altercation. That's always lovely when you got your kid out there and you're just going along with it. 2015 training camp fight is another thing. While rehabbing from his ACL tear, Fowler was involved in a minor scuffle during a Jaguars practice. That's obviously not a big deal. So this was 2016-17. And we're talking about 2018 is when the off-the-field concerns supposedly cooled the Packers' interest. That was a long time ago. And I don't know if 7 years later the Packers are still going to hold that against them. Obviously, we're talking about, a 22, 23-year-old compared to a 30-year-old. There's some idiot 30-year-olds out there, but I just think that there's a lot less of them. You know what I mean? I think most people in the 30s look back at 20-year-old themselves and go, oh, God. But that brings us to the other news, and this is a little bit more reputable, which makes it interesting, but again, I don't really understand it. So Ari Mirov tweeted out, the Rams are officially releasing wide receiver Cooper Kupp. He quote tweeted that and said, the Packers are among several teams who have been eyeing Cooper Kupp, waiting for him to be released. Listen, pay no attention to the background noises, okay? That's none of your business. Things just got super ominous around here. So, again, is it real? I don't know. As much as Ari is reliable, it doesn't really matter because the question is he just being used to put out a team to make him seem more desirable? I don't understand this one at all. Now, again, we'll get into the whole thing with wide receiver in a minute. This will kind of segue into that. But let's start with this. He is a 32-year-old slot receiver that has not been healthy since 2021. Imagine if Jair was 32 and a slot corner, and the question is, should we bring him in? Jair's like, 28, 29, and is a boundary corner, and we still don't really want to keep him? I get he had that one awesome year. He had 2,400 yards and 22 touchdowns. He's only had one other double-digit touchdown season. He's only had 2 seasons over 1,000 yards in his 8-year career. He's always graded out fairly well, but the last 2 years have been his worst 2 years of his career, and again, he's been injured both years. Going backwards, his last 3 years, again, so let's actually do this. Let's go back to 2022. He played weeks 1 through, let's assume that was a bye week, 1 through 10, and he missed the rest of the season. He ended the season with 812 yards and 6 touchdowns. In 2023, he missed the first 4 weeks of the season, and then looks like he played most of the rest of the season, probably a continuation of his last injury. Unfortunately, he didn't play very well. His first 2 weeks, he graded out well. After that, his grades were quite bad. He ended with a 71.5 overall, which seems nice, aside from, again, almost every single game he graded out poorly and then had 2 really good games to start the season. And then 2024, you say, okay, he's back from injury, all that stuff, everything should be fine. He played the first 2 games, weeks 1 and 2, didn't come back until week 8. So he missed 5 weeks. Ended with 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. So 800, 700, 800, 6, 5, and 6 for touchdowns. He's only had over 6 touchdowns twice and over 1,000 yards 3 years out of 8. He is absolutely on the downswing of his career. I don't get it. I don't understand any part of this. I don't understand the injury part of it. I don't understand the production part of it. I don't understand the part where we're looking for people that have years out in front of them. I don't understand the fact that he's a slot receiver, which is not what we're looking for. It's not what I'm looking for. Maybe the Packers are looking for that. I don't know. But there is nothing about this that makes any sense to me. Of all the boxes that you want checked, this checks 0 of them for me. Now, with that said, let's just do a minor thought experiment here. After Marquez Valdes-Scantling was picked up on a 1-year deal by the Seahawks, a lot of people thought the Packers would go that direction because we need a Christian Watson replacement. We need the field stretcher, right? He's gone, and, well, here's what Christian Watson had to say. I think he had a moment, like a lot of us did, where we kind of just sat back and said, now what? Not that I wanted MVS, I didn't, but I think he brings up a good point. He says, I can only assume that the Packers have pinpointed some guys in the draft who they believe can be quote-unquote field stretchers. They're shifting off, so the multiple choice here. They've identified field stretchers, they're shifting offensive philosophy, or they just know something we don't about who's going to be available and when. In my opinion, if an NFL veteran is not getting the gig, Higgins is the only wide receiver in the draft who even comes close to the need in this draft. It is a fair question because, again, we need that number 1 X guy, whatever, right? We also need a field stretcher. You could get both. That's why DK, in my opinion, was a great option if you can get a number 1 field stretcher. Or you just go get a field stretcher type guy and rely on guys like Romeo Doubs or Dontavian Wicks to take a step in that sort of X role. Dontavian would be fantastic if he could stop dropping the ball. So that does kind of lead us down a path of what is the plan. We need a Christian Watson, or we need to change our offensive philosophy to one that doesn't rely on something like that. That kind of brings me to a point that Clayton brought up that I wanted to briefly explore because I hadn't explored it before. He says, when speaking about finding the next Packers wide receiver, whether it be free agency or the draft, you almost always hear, we already have a slot receiver. Jayden Reed played a ton of Z in college and actually more snaps out wide than in the slot. He can do both well. All right. So this is an interesting thought because we're essentially taking Jayden Reed and making him the Christian Watson. Now, if you did do that, then it's kind of similar to we lost a center and got a guard. Why did you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, we lost a center and got a guard because we're going to move our guard to center, and now what we're actually missing is a slot. If our plan was to move Jayden Reed out to Z or as the sort of deep threat whatever guy, where is our deficiency? It's in the slot. So let's just say if the Green Bay Packers did go after Cooper Kupp, that would be my immediate thought. Much like when we went and got a guard, my first thought was Elton Jenkins is moving to center. If we get Cooper Kupp, my immediate thought is Jayden Reed is our new Z. Now, I don't know 100%. I mean, college is not the NFL. He pointed to, let me see if I have so many stupid tabs open right here. I know some of these are Jayden Reed in college. So right now, Jayden Reed in the NFL with the Green Bay Packers has been a slot receiver 75.7% of the time. That's pretty consistent. His lowest is 75.2, his highest 76.3. But as he pointed out, in college, he was a slot receiver his first 2 years, his first being at Western Michigan, where he was in the slot 98% of the time. Then he went to Michigan State, and his first year there, he was a slot 76% of the time until it became clear that he is one of their premier receivers. He got moved to the boundary, where he was in the slot just 16% of the time, and then in 2022, it was 22% of the time. And to further make the case, again, I know it's, college and the pros are not the same thing. 2021, his first year moving to the boundary primarily was his best year in college. His worst year at Michigan State was his 1 year as a slot receiver. One additional thing to keep in mind here when we look at this. Here is an article from Packers Wire, USA Today. Paul Brettel wrote this. This is May 25th, 2023. Bulk of early practice reps for Packers wide receiver Jayden Reed coming from the slot. So this is year one, Jayden Reed trying to get a beat on what he's been doing. One of the reasons the Green Bay Packers drafted Jayden Reed in the second round of the 2023 draft was his versatility, but not surprisingly, the rookie receiver has taken most of the snaps from the slot to begin OTAs. A lot of slot and a little bit outside, said Reed following Tuesday's practice. It's kind of similar to college, but I'm primarily in the slot now, so it's different. I like working in space, and I'll fit in the NFL playing in the slot, but also rotating outside. Following the selection of Reed, Packers Vice President of Player Personnel John Eric Sullivan spoke with the media and discussed the versatility that Reed brings. Sullivan said that he has the speed to play outside, with the Packers clocking him at 4.37 during the pre-draft process, but also the strength to line up in the slot. Sullivan also added that Reed could be used on jet sweeps and pointed out the experience as a return man as well. So I wanted to point out those two things. One of them we've talked about a few times, right? His official 40 time is quite slower. It was somewhat disappointing. The Packers took him in the second round. A lot of people were surprised. And then John Eric Sullivan comes out and they're like, oh, I don't give a crap about that 40 time. We have him clocked at 4.37. We know dude is a lot faster. 4.37 is quick. It's not Christian Watson fast, but he's a fast receiver. So, in addition, John Eric Sullivan said he can play on the outside. And obviously, they've used him on the outside, so they've made the determination of how much they'd want him out there. There's going to be some concern with his inability to kind of win against man coverage, although, again, he's not an X receiver, so there's going to be a little bit more versatility. He's going to be off the line of scrimmage and whatnot a little bit. But the idea being, there is a scenario where, in a pinch, what we'd be looking to do is to move him out to the boundary as that Z receiver, at least until Christian Watson can come back, which is probably going to be a while. The other interesting thing about it is even if we don't do this, it becomes real interesting. By do this, I mean even if we don't bring in Cooper Kupp. It starts to get real interesting when you look at a guy like, for example, Emeka Egbuka, because he's kind of the same thing. Right? It's like, well, he's kind of a slot guy. He could probably play outside, but now you can kind of play with that a little bit. Do you want Jayden Reed in the slot and Egbuka outside? You could possibly put Jayden outside and Emeka Egbuka in the slot. Maybe you could have Egbuka as the X. You know what I mean? The point is, if they genuinely believe that they can do that they can move him out to the boundary and that he can thrive out there as a Z receiver, that opens up a lot of flexibility because now we can get an X receiver, which is something that we probably need, although we still need a Z receiver. We can primarily target speed, right? To go get, you can get like a Matthew Golden, who I think would be a great option. Or, again, you can target a guy like Egbuka with the versatility to move one or the other or both outside, kind of mix and match as it comes, as you see fit. And that, listen, it's probably not their favorite plan. If they had desired him being on the boundary, he would have been a long time ago. But the point is, they have to do something. And there is a scenario where they say that is an option that we have. And when it's about getting the best, again, like the offensive line, you go get a guard so that you can put the best five on the field with Elton Jenkins at center. When you're trying to get the best, 2 or 3 wide receivers, let's say, on the field, there's a scenario where Jayden Reed outside of the Z ends up giving you your best options because it's easier to find that slot guy that you can put in there than to find the next Christian Watson. Or at the very least, give them the flexibility to go into the draft and say, let's let the draft come to us, and we have that kind of working for us. Kind of like if they were to go into the draft and say, we'd like to get a center, but we could also get a guard and move Elton to center, which we don't have to do that now necessarily because we've already taken care of that. But the point is they have that flexibility from the start. And again, I don't know. And I'm sure if you ask the Packers, they would say absolutely because that's just what they're going to say. So I don't know how to gauge exactly how much they really like that plan as opposed to saying we'd really rather not. But I do think it's an interesting thought experiment. Because, again, he's got the speed to be a field stretcher. At least they believe that he does. And so if they think that they've already got it on the team, then maybe they don't need to go out and find it. Just a thought. That's all. All right, I'm going to leave you guys with that. Have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.